Good day and welcome to Of Many Things. I'm Father Matt Malone. I'm the editor-in-chief of America Magazine. This is a special edition of Many Things. We intended to have this on Friday, but there were problems in the national network of the live stream provider that we use as an intermediary. So apologies for that, and thank you for joining us today. There is perhaps no part of the church in this country, apart from our parishes and, of course, Catholic hospitals, that has been more adversely affected by the twin crises of a pandemic and economic recession than our Catholic schools. And so we thought that this is a good opportunity to talk to somebody who's very close to the ground, who knows what's going on in our Catholic schools, and can tell us a bit about how they're faring and what they might do, what we might do to help. Jill Kafka is the executive director of the partnership, which is a network of several schools in the in Harlem and in the South Bronx here in New York City. And she is joining me now. Jill, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So your network of schools is here at the epicenter of the pandemic in the United States. How are you faring?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's really been challenging, and there are so many heartbreaking stories. But I think, honestly, we're faring really, really, really well. We were really nimble, especially at the beginning, getting our kids pivoted to distance learning. We didn't even skip a beat or miss a day of instruction. I'm really proud of the way our teachers and leaders have been able to be adaptable and resilient. We also made some decisions and were decisive early because we knew we needed to decide how we were going to help our families very quickly. And we said we would waive tuition and fees for the remainder of the closure so that no one had to worry about having to pay tuition at a time when they might be losing their job or having to pay rent or for food. We also said we were going to pay our teams and continue to keep the payroll going. And lastly, through our board chair's push, we formed a COVID relief fund. That is, we raised some money to put cash in the hands of families that are having immediate needs and problems, that some of which aren't going to be solved quickly by government money, or if at all, for some of them. And I think our Catholic schools are faring really well because they're sort of built for this. They're based on being, caring about each other, being a family, building relationships, and really having the sort of resilience to get through issues like this with faith and values and everything that Catholic schools bring. They're shining right now.
Right, which is, of course, the most important resource that you bring to that to a crisis like this, right? Which is our faith and hope and charity.
Yes.
Now, so many folks who are the students who are served by the Catholic schools in New York City and in your network, their parents and families come from low to moderate income places, and they have been the most adversely affected by the economic recession that we're undergoing right now. I imagine that there are a lot of parents of your students who are now unemployed, and
yes.
that adds additional pressures, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, because they're normally, and some of them are on the front lines if they are employed, and so they're risking themselves right now at a time when everyone else is able to shelter. And so the stories we're hearing are absolutely showing that they need our help. And this fund that we started, I think, was a really big step towards doing that, because we have families, a grandmother of a family who has 6 people to feed. She's trying to, her daughter lost her job. She's taking on shifts at a hospital, which is in the epicenter of this crisis right now, to try to make ends meet. And we're giving out these cash grants to some of these families to get through this time, and kind of keeping that warm embrace of a Catholic school and our communities surrounding these families, and continuing to check in with them on how they're doing and how we can help.
Mm. And of course, the challenge that is facing the Catholic school network is also a national challenge, isn't it? We heard last week that in Newark, 10 Catholic schools closed, and also the Cristo Rey School, which was based in Newark, closed. We're hearing these stories from around the country. It's no secret that Catholic education had faced some serious economic challenges over the last few years, and those schools that were sort of hanging by a thread have been most adversely affected by these twin crises. I'm, what are we to make of that as as our listeners, as our readers hear all these stories about what's going on with Catholic schools and schools closing in Newark? How do we make sense of that story?
I mean, I guess, from our perspective, having tried a new model that's working here in New York, we sort of think about it as it shouldn't be business as usual, and this crisis may be a moment where we should all come together to help these schools because they are needed more than ever. They're showing they're doing a great job at a time when a lot of people, can't do as well. And I think they're uniquely positioned to help the most vulnerable and always have, since they've existed. So to me, I feel like this is a moment we should be looking at how do we help these schools differently. We need, innovative philanthropy. I think the church has to embrace competition and accountability and transparency. I think we can do more in trying to get more government funding and advocacy, and also more on communication side so that we spread the word of why these schools are so valuable and people come together now, maybe in this disruption, to change that, to not sit by and just make it inevitable that these Catholic schools are going to close.
So obviously no one would wish for a crisis to befall anyone, let alone our Catholic school system. But when it does, when crises happen, there are also opportunities. That's what
Yeah.
you're saying. Yeah.
Yes.
And
And
it's
we're
an
on the front
opportunity.
lines. And yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, just, being on the front lines and seeing the fact that these Catholic schools can get better, they can turn around, and proving that, I think is valuable lesson for the country. And hopefully, because there are more people than just us that are doing something different in Catholic education, but I think now is the time to amplify it and scale it up quickly as we have this moment, and not just sit idly by while these schools go away.
Mm. And certainly in those places where parishes have had to shut down because of the epidemic, they're not having mass, they're not having CCD, and so forth. The schools in your network could be the only point of contact for these families, these students, and the church at this moment in the life of
Yes,
the church.
yes, and they're doing a lot in terms of the prayer life of the school. We have, one school is having every Tuesday. A whole group of people are saying the Rosary together. We're having prayer in the morning at our, Instagram live morning assemblies. I think Catholic schools are pulling people together when the world's sort of falling apart right now, and that still involves faith, even though we're not all able to be together. So I think you're right. We're doing that in spades right now.
Right. So the partnership is really an innovative model. It's taking a different approach to our Catholic schools, and I wonder if you could just tell our listeners and our audience a bit about the partnership and how it's different from what they might
Sure.
understand the model to be where they live.
Right. So the partnership is an independent network of 7 Catholic schools in the South Bronx and Harlem. And we have a unique arrangement with the Archdiocese of New York, where we have the authority to make all the decisions around operating the school, like hiring and firing, curriculum, instruction, operations, finance, and we control all that centrally for our 7 schools. But these schools are still the Archdiocese of New York schools. And so Cardinal Dolan was very bold and brave to say, I'm going to give sort of I'm going to give over management to an independent organization. But we've been doing this for 7 years, and I think we're showing that that's a different approach to operating Catholic schools, and it's working.
What is the biggest challenge you're facing in this, even before this crisis? What was the biggest challenge that you faced in this project?
I mean, I think we've always faced how do we keep supporting our kids, because we take kids as they come to us. We don't, there are always kids that have gaps, and so we're trying to fill gaps. We're trying to improve the culture of our schools, the academic results, which we have done over time. And then obviously a big challenge is getting more students to come, because even though 80% of our kids are on a scholarship, we still need to charge some tuition. And I think that had been a challenge, is finding parents that are willing to make that sacrifice to send their child to a Catholic school. We don't have, vouchers or tax credits here in New York. So it's a double challenge to be able to get to help those families, bring their students to us. And that's, I think, going to get even harder now.
Yeah, I can imagine that it would. There is a I think that there's probably some folks out there who say, why do we need Catholic schools? Are they still important? Aren't the public schools good enough? And why should the church be involved in the work of primary and secondary education? How do you respond to that when people ask?
Well, I always say we do it for half as much and twice as well. Because we have our schools are operating at half the cost of what public schools in New York City are running at. So we save the public money. And we also provide a diversity of choice, right? I mean, not every parent, they should be able to have options and different ways they want to educate their students. So I think we provide that diversity. And as long as, again, we concentrate on being competitive, which I think is essential, you know, we deserve to be a choice, and so I do think Catholic schools should be there for these families, when especially now when they need us more than ever.
Right. And it seems to me that another reason is people, parents, families, they want to have that faith dimension to their children's education, and that is so crucially important. I remember when we met a few years ago, uh, I said people are always asking, can the church save our Catholic schools? And I think the question is, can the schools help save the church? Because there is well, we're just seeing it in this crisis right now with the parishes being shut down. Not only is the school an important point of contact, it's sometimes the only point of contact that the church has with these various populations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I loved when you said that, because I think it's a treasure that the church has that they have to, invest in, I think, and really preserve for the future, because they're once these schools close, they're not going to come back. And there's even studies that have shown that when Catholic schools close in a community, there is increased, crime and disruption of the sort of social fabric, right, of that community. And I think it's too late once they're gone, and we need to keep them there because they are holding some of these communities together and they're building community.
Right. Right. So what are the big questions, big challenges that you face over the next 6 months?
Well, first of all, we're figuring out what are we going to do this summer. Can we provide some sort of programming and academics and support, and just a break for our parents so they can get the kids out of the house? Can we bring them together in small groups? Another challenge is just then how we're going to be, operating in the fall, and what we're going to be able to do to keep our kids safe and our communities safe, but also still deliver an education, which is our primary goal. So we're doing a lot of planning, I think, over the next 6 months. We're also working on an expansion project because we've known that our model's working here, so we're looking to bring it to Ohio, and that's another thing that we're hoping for more support for, and to get that done in the next few weeks. So we have a lot of planning and a lot of forward thinking to do, but I think if we keep our focus really on our kids, on our communities, and continuing to support them, we should be able to fare this, and I hope even be stronger afterward.
So you're really taking the results of this experiment from this laboratory and wanting to replicate them elsewhere.
Yeah,
It's exciting,
it
even
is.
given all of the
I
challenges that you
know.
face.
And if we can, even then, I think it's doubly exciting.
Yeah. So how can people help, and how can they learn more?
Well, I mean, you can learn more, go to our website or email me or get in touch with me. We are looking for people that want to be part of this, not now an experiment, but something that's working in Catholic education. There are a lot of other people also doing great work, also, thinking of new models and approaching the problem differently. So connect with us, and we're happy to talk more about how people can rise up and try to support these Catholic schools at a really pivotal time.
And your website is
Partnershipnyc.org.
partnershipnyc.org. So
And read our
please, if
blog.
you're, is that where things are being updated?
Yeah, almost every day we're putting up, stories of success, and like on the ground that some of our families, our kids, our teacher appreciation videos. I mean, it's really been amazing how our whole communities have come together. Our parents are so grateful. Our kids are really, just embracing this, even though it's hard. And I think those stories and telling that is super important.
Jill Kafka, thank you so much for being with us, and best
Thank
of
you,
luck
Matt.
with your work. And we will be praying for you and for your students.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Take
Take care. One of the things that we are constantly having a debate about in the church and in the larger society is, how do we bring about change? And especially when you have old institutions like our Catholic School Network or America Magazine, which was founded in 1909, how do you take what is best from that tradition and from that history and bring it forward into a new century? How do you innovate? How do you create additional opportunities? How do you go about the process of reflecting on what is working and what isn't? And I always say that I think that process works best when we say, when we don't ask, what can we do that's never been done before? But how do we do what we've always been doing, but in a new way, using technology and the best creative minds and market forces and all of that to create a new way of doing something that is important, that makes a difference in people's lives, that has a that has a that has an impact, basically. I mean, for so many of the students that are served by Jill Kafka schools and our Catholic schools throughout this country, this Catholic education is their ticket to college and to the middle class, and that's important. It's an important So as important as our Catholic schools are to helping people and students, parents, families form their faith, it's also an important contribution that Catholic schools make to the life of this country, to the economic, social, and political life of this country. They're not only helping to create, boys and girls, men and women who have well-formed consciences and a moral center, but they're also helping to create good citizens and entrepreneurs. So it's a vitally important work, and that's why I wanted to have Jill Kafka on today to talk about that. And it was actually the topic of that now famous or infamous, depending on how you viewed it, phone call between some of the U.S. Catholic bishops and President Trump. I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. I talked about it in my column. And what's unfortunate is because of how the call unfolded and the various reactions to it, we've lost sight of the fact that what they were really talking about, were supposed to be talking about in that call, was exactly what we were talking about today. And that's one of the challenges that those of us who work in media face in the world in which we live. Very often the story that moves, the story that gets attention, the story that motivates people, to come to your website, to read your newspaper, to look at your magazine, is the optics of the real story, right? Or the politics that surrounds the real story. And it's a challenge for mission-driven organizations like America to figure out ways to drive as many people as possible to think, to read, reflect, and think about the story that is within the story, often what we call the real story. It's a challenge to figure out how to do that in the world in which we live. One way that we're doing it at America is we are trying to, we have sought out to create a multi-platform media organization in which we invite opinions and insights from across the spectrum of opinion. So I ventured an opinion about that phone call with President Trump a couple of weeks ago. A few days later, Father Sam Sawyer, who is another editor at America, he offered a different opinion. And in the process of our readers reading and reflecting on those opinions, they've offered hundreds of opinions of their own. That is the way that it should be. We should be able to have a conversation. We should be able to have an argument. We should be able to have a debate that is intelligent, that is informed, that is charitable. And I'm proud to say that is what we're doing in America. It's hard work. It's a lot easier in some ways to just fall in line with the polarized partisan team of our choice. But we're trying to do something different, and I'm awfully proud of our results so far. Thank you for being a part of that conversation. So thank you for joining us today. Please come back this Friday at 12 p.m. for another weekly reflection for Of Many Things. I'm going to be joined actually this Friday by Dr. Scott Hahn, who is a biblical scholar at the Franciscan University of Steubenville. He's written a new book about death and burial and how cremation plays into that, and how our theology and spirituality of the body over the years, some suggestions he has for how that ought to inform our decision making, of course, at that crucial time in the life cycle. So you'll probably want to check that out, because I know it's something that a lot of people talk about, and as a priest, I'm asked about all the time. And I think Professor Hahn gives us a good framework for thinking about it, and perhaps for having an argument about it, which is, as I said, the whole point. Be sure to follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos from America. And of course, you can find all of our content, including a couple of really great stories about the partnership network that Jill Kafka heads, at americamagazine.org. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.